Let's talk about what actually happens inside your brain on magic mushrooms. What's the real science behind the trip? I want to start with this quote from Dr. Timothy Leary, a Harvard psychologist way back in 1960. It really captures just how profound this experience can be, something that's fascinated and, kind of mystified people for centuries. So it begs a huge question, right? How can a simple fungus, something that grows in the ground, trigger what many people call one of the most significant experiences of their entire lives? What's the actual biological play-by-play? To figure that out, we're going to go on a little trip ourselves. We're going to follow the molecule from the moment it's eaten all the way through the body and deep into the wiring of the brain. Okay, so our journey starts at the very beginning, ingestion. This is where the first crucial chemical transformation kicks everything off. So here's the first interesting twist. The main compound in magic mushrooms, psilocybin, isn't actually what does the heavy lifting. Think of it like a prodrug, a precursor. When you consume it, your body's metabolism gets to work and basically snips off a little piece of the molecule. This process transforms it into psilocin, and that is the active compound that can cross into the brain and get the party started. All right, so once psilocin makes it into the brain, it's not just floating around randomly. Nope. It has a very specific target, the brain's own system for managing mood and perception. And this is where things get really clever. Scientists call it a molecular masquerade. Take a look. On the left, you've got psilocin. On the right, you have serotonin, the key neurotransmitter our brain uses to regulate happiness, anxiety, all that stuff. See how similar they look? Psilocin is basically a perfect imposter. Because it's such a good look-alike, psilocin can fit perfectly into the locks that were built for serotonin, specifically a receptor called the 5-HT2A receptor. You can think of psilocin as a skeleton key that unlocks a very special door in the brain. And flipping this one switch, well, that's the main trigger for the whole cascade of psychedelic effects that come next. But here's the thing. Unlocking that one door doesn't just affect one room. It sends a shockwave through the brain's entire communication network, totally changing how different parts of the brain talk to each other. Now, to really get this, we have to talk about something called the default mode network, or DMN. This is like the brain's CEO, or maybe it's orchestra conductor. It's not a single spot, but a whole network that's running when you're just daydreaming, thinking about yourself, your past, your future. It's the part that builds your sense of I, your ego. But it's also where that nagging inner voice tends to live. And this slide shows the change perfectly. Normally, your brain is super efficient. Information flows down these well-traveled neural highways, with the DMN acting as the traffic cop. But on psilocybin, activity in the DMN just plummets. The CEO is out of the office, the conductor drops the baton, and the whole brain enters this much more flexible, chaotic, and interconnected state. Suddenly, all these new back roads open up between brain regions that almost never speak to each other. So what does this actually mean for your thoughts? Well, a leading theory is called the rebus model. The idea is that the DMN is like a filter, enforcing all our rigid beliefs about who we are and how the world works. Psilocybin relaxes that filter, letting a flood of raw, unfiltered information pour in from our senses. This can lead to this incredible state of openness, where you can have totally new insights. Okay, so we've talked about these big changes in brain networks, but what does all that actually feel like? How does this brain-level stuff translate into the experience people have? This chart connects the dots for us. That breakdown of the default mode network, that's what people describe as ego dissolution, that feeling of being one with everything. That crazy increase in new connections, that can lead to things like synesthesia, where you might see sounds or hear colors. Changes in the amygdala, the brain's emotion center, can lead to these huge emotional breakthroughs. And with less control from the logical prefrontal cortex, you can get a flood of creative, out-of-the-box thinking. And the personal meaning of these experiences, well, it's honestly hard to overstate. One of the most important studies on this topic came up with a truly jaw-dropping statistic, and it's all wrapped up in this one number: 70%. This comes from a landmark study at Johns Hopkins back in 2006. Over 2/3 of the people in the study put their psilocybin experience in the same category as the birth of their first child or the death of a parent. It's that profound. So it's no surprise that this kind of profound impact has kicked off a massive renewal in scientific research. People are now asking, can this experience be harnessed for healing? I mean, look at this timeline. After decades of being totally shut down, research finally started again in 2000. That 2006 study we just talked about, that really opened the floodgates. By 2018, the FDA was giving it breakthrough therapy status. And today, you've got over 130 clinical trials looking into it for all sorts of conditions. And the list of potential uses is just remarkable. They're investigating its effectiveness for really tough-to-treat depression, major anxiety, addiction to things like alcohol and nicotine, PTSD, and even eating disorders. So the key idea for therapy isn't just the trip itself, it's what happens after. Psilocybin seems to shake the brain out of those rigid, stuck, negative thought loops that define conditions like depression. It's like hitting a reset button, creating this window of opportunity to build new, healthier ways of thinking. And as the researchers behind that big 2006 study put it, figuring this stuff out isn't just some scientific curiosity. It could unlock totally new ways to approach mental health. And it would just be, scientifically short-sighted not to see where this goes. Which leaves us with one last big question. We've gone from a fungus to a molecule to the symphony of the brain. We're finally starting to draw a map of this incredible inner world. The real question is, now that we have the map, where do we decide to go?